So it's my honor to serve at North Carolina Faith and Freedom. I'm the grassroots director. So that plan that Jason shared, it's my job to try to execute that this summer and fall. And every time Jason speaks, I think he adds about 25,000 more doors to that plan. So by the time we get to September, I'll probably be knocking on 1 million doors this fall. But we really appreciate you coming out, and I have a unique perspective in the pro-life world. I served on the pregnancy center as a board director for 8 years in Cabarrus County. I've worked with Love Life as a sidewalk counselor and helping them launch their statewide campaign, and also worked with a lot of the influencers that you're going to hear later today. And so I really appreciated what Bob talked about in regards to that quilt, because what I see so many times in the pro-life movement is sometimes we start to fight over donors, we start to fight over staff, we start to let our human nature take over from our ministry. And so one of the goals that I have personally from today as we talk as a panel, as you hear so many different people talking on the stage, is that if we're going to win this fight and we're actually going to take care of her and him and their children on a post-Roe world, we really have to work in unity. That's a biblical sense. That's a biblical term. It's never easy. It actually is probably harder to work in unity than it is to just ignore it. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I've got these two great-looking ladies on the stage that have so much more experience than me in the pro-life world. And so I first want to introduce Julie Scott Emmons, and she's with the Human Coalition. If you just want to say a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I wasn't ready for that. Hi, I'm Julie Scott Emmons, and it's my privilege to be the Director of Strategic Partnerships for Human Coalition. I've been with Human Coalition since last August, and very privileged to be here. I've also been involved in the pro-life movement in varying roles and responsibilities for the past few decades. Worked for Congress for a little while, did some pro-life lobbying in the legislature last spring, and it is my privilege to be a part of this amazing, compassionate organization that's making a difference all over the nation. Thank you for being here today.
And also on the platform, we got Chelsea Yeoman from Texas. And could you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Of course. My name is Chelsea Yeoman, and I am the National Director of Public Policy for Human Coalition. And we just really love, our heart and desire is to serve women and expand services to women, but also rescue children. And that's a twofold method that we're really passionate about at Human Coalition. And we develop policies to do both of those things, really based on the knowledge that Human Coalition has serving women every day, understanding what she needs, what specific help will get her on her feet, what her demographics are, and then we design everything towards her. So that's a little bit about what I do at Human Coalition.
Great, welcome. Thank you very much. So what we've been tasked with is to kind of give you an overview of what the rest of the day is going to look like from the panels. And so we've got a panel of pastors, a panel of legislators that will be on the stage here shortly, and then also a panel of influencers. And so, Julie, I want to start with you. Could you've been an advocate for life for so many different roles, and you shared with us. For those who have seen our conference and are new to the pro-life movement, what are some ways inside the church and outside the church in which each of us can stand for life?
Thank you. Well, first of all, if you're new to the pro-life movement, welcome. We're glad you're here. And I know I'm looking at people who I personally know who have done so many things to speak out for the preborn and their moms, to stand up for life over the years. And, Jim, you mentioned inside and outside the church, what we can do to support the pro-life movement. Well, I think, first of all, particularly when we talk about the church, and that's what I'll address is the church panel you're going to hear from later, is to remember the foundation on which we stand, and that is God's word. And in Micah 6:8, when we are instructed to love mercy, to do justly, to walk humbly, that's how we approach this issue. But I want to encourage you that every single person in this room has a sphere of influence. You can make a difference for our preborn babies and their moms. The fact that, when I came in this morning and I saw the Post-Roe title, it's just starting to sink in, okay? And the way I see this right now is really those that have come before us in the pro-life movement are kind of passing the baton to us. And what do we do with this? How are we going to be here for these women? And we're seeing the fruits of their labor. But in talking about churches, we focus on, really two perspectives here, and they're not mutually exclusive. That's grace and truth. So what we want to do is we want to lead with grace. We want to remember that 1 in 3 women in our churches have a personal story with abortion. And you could also add their family members. And so anytime we talk about this issue, reminding people of the forgiveness and the grace found in Jesus Christ. In 1 John 1:9, if we confess our sins, he is faithful and faithful to forgive us our sins and cleanse us of all unrighteousness. And also, first of all, when we talk with pastors in churches, caring for the women in our pews first. Making sure that our church has that culture of life where if she's sitting there and she's facing an unexpected pregnancy, knowing that she knows that she's going to receive love and care and grace, before we even look outside the church. But also speaking the truth. Speaking the truth about abortion, and Chelsea will talk a little bit more about this later, this is taking the life of an innocent little human being. And when we think about churches, we think about how many youth groups have never heard that? We have captive audiences in our churches. And so being willing to speak the truth in love, to talk about what this is, and you know what? That's loving, isn't it? For us to be open about abortion, not only what it is, but how we can work together to love women, to love moms, and to rescue their little preborn children. And so that's just a few little things to start that we can all do within our churches.
Thank you, Julie. So Chelsea, we think about Texas here from North Carolina, and we think of this big red state that's just controlled by Republicans, and anything you want to do, you can do. But we certainly know that's not the case. And so, in your role in governance, in working with legislators, how is the church and folks like in this room, how dependent upon them are you in order to advance your narrative? And how did that all come to be? And, when you were advancing the heartbeat bill, how did all of us and our counterparts in Texas, how did that support your role?
Well, that's a great question. First I would say it's a crucial part of the equation because without really courageous pro-life leaders, not just pro-life leaders, but leaders who are courageous and willing to stand in the gap and be a voice for the voiceless, we couldn't get it done. And I will say in the state of Texas, the legislators led the initiative. And not all of leadership in the legislature was necessarily on board with the Texas Heartbeat Act, but they had to be because the leaders would not stop until it was done. And so there was such of a strength about them and a resolve about them that I hardly had to lobby. I helped with floor debate prep. I helped with the draft of the bill. We brought testimony to support, but the grassroots was so strong and so loud, and their representatives care deeply about their grassroots voices. They responded and led this, and I am so encouraged by their hearts in leadership in that, and again, their resolve. But ending abortion will not be easy, even in a post-Roe world. I think a lot will fall away on our side, and it's upon us as the constituents to be heard and to be vocal. And ultimately, the Texas legislature responded, and it was an incredible experience.
Well, that's great. So it's been said that politics follows the culture. And so when we work here in North Carolina, and we begin to advance legislation, whether it be with in working with some of the great legislators you're going to hear from in a little bit, or whether a group, whether North Carolina Faith and Freedom, NC Values, North Carolina Policy Council, all of these grassroots groups that we're talking about, when they ask you to reach out, the most important way to reach out to a legislator is actually picking up the telephone and calling them. If you actually take the time to pick up the phone and call, that's probably equates to 250, 300 emails. You know, we live in this high-tech world, and we use email petitions, and other groups in our state use email petitions. But if you pick up your phone and you call, wow, that makes a huge difference to a legislator. If you actually show up to the legislature, we have days of action here. Specifically, I'm sure we'll have them as we start to advance legislation. You'll hear Tammy and John Rustin and Skip Stam talking about the engagement with the public. When we have a day of action and you actually take off work, or if you take off half a day of work and you come and you show up in Raleigh and you look at your legislator in the eye and you say, this is passionate, this is something I care about richly, you know, that's like 1,000 emails. Right? And so, but our legislators are following the culture. So when they hear you talking about it on social media, when you're putting it out onto Twitter, I don't know if any of us even use that platform anymore, but legislators do. When you're talking about it on Facebook, when you're engaged with them to advance the issue, they're actually paying attention, because they're taking the other side is really beating them up. It's beating them up immensely out on these public spheres of influence. And so many times, we hear legislators discouraged when they advocate for these issues of life, because the left is beating them up, and the church is silent. All of us in this room, we may be silent. Now, we could be silent because we're busy at our pregnancy centers. We're busy advancing the issue of life. But when these battles come up, it's so critical. So Chelsea, how did Texas show up when you guys started doing the heartbeat bill?
Well, they showed up pretty loud, but the other side was louder, I would say, to be honest. And to add on to what you said, I had a state senator in Texas who was a Democrat, and I knew him personally to be pro-life. He was Catholic, and I knew personally he was pro-life, but he wouldn't vote with us. And I sat down with him, and he said, I know my district is pro-life, but when I show up at my district office, there are 25 Planned Parenthood supporters out there and feminists testifying. The protesting with their signs. And he said, I only ever hear from the feminists. And if I heard from the churches, if I heard from all of the people I know to be pro-life, I would vote that way, but they're not showing up. And so I think that's powerful to remember that your individual voice, a group of 25 Planned Parenthood activists, were enough to shut down his vote. And how much louder are we when our cause is righteous and our cause is good, and we can stand firm on the truth that we have. So I'll say that. What I'll also say about the Texas Heartbeat Act was we really brought our method at Human Coalition, where we're built on these clinics serving women. We know abortion harms women. Depression rates go up after abortion. Suicide rates go up after abortion. Fertility issues go up after abortion. We do not believe abortion is best for women. And so we brought that testimony to the forefront. And we had so many of our clinic staff, there's clinic staff sitting over there right now, and I love your work because you're day in, day out doing this. But we had this clinic staff who'd never been to the legislature before, never testified before, really pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, and they showed up. We had women giving their own personal testimonies of abortion and hearing the heartbeats of their children. And then we had our sonographer come up, and she played the heartbeats on the record of a 6-week-old in the womb and a 20-week-old in the womb. And she didn't say which one was which, and they were indistinguishable. And she said, one of these heartbeats can be stopped, and one of these is protected under Texas law. How can that be fair? And it really brought that humanity of the life in the womb to the surface, and the senators were tearing up. It was such a poignant moment and an important moment in the discussion we were having, where we can talk about the law, we can talk about the nuanced civil enforcement mechanism, but at the end of the day, we're talking about humans. I think that really resonated with the legislature.
So, Julie, I know that you've actually testified at the General Assembly, and you've also served on congressional staff. What's the weight that our lawmakers give to the average citizen when they show up and they share their viewpoint in some of these hearings?
Well, Chelsea's right. I mean, I've heard that same thing also from legislators here in North Carolina. It makes a huge difference when people take time out of their day to reach out. Whether it's a personal meeting, a phone call, I guess you could do a Zoom call now with your legislator. But it was a similar story here. I don't want to embarrass the Ng family, but I want to point you out. There was a really special moment here in North Carolina last spring. A bill was advancing through the legislature which would ban abortion for reasons of Down syndrome. And we were in committee hearing, and it was a Senate Judiciary Committee, I believe. And Dr. Wing Ng over here, wave everybody, was there with his wife Han and their daughters, Kieran and Jaden. And Wing was about to get up and speak on behalf of this bill because Jaden has Down syndrome. And she texted or asked her dad, who then texted me, "Can I talk?" And Jaden got up and she grabbed the microphone and she looked at all those senators and she said, "My name is Jaden and I'm 13 years old and I'm God's child." And that is because a family took time away from school, away from work. They came multiple times to the legislative building to talk to our representatives and our senators. We had a little army that ended up coming, right, Jim?
We did.
You couldn't miss us. So I will say, it makes a huge difference when people come because the days are long. The legislative days are long. They've had so many things going on. So it makes a huge difference. And thank you for pointing that out, Chelsea. And we're ready to go right here in North Carolina. Okay, we're going to show up when it's time to do this here.
It was a powerful day to hear that testimony, especially from a 13-year-old young lady. She turned some legislative hearts and minds towards that bill.
Jaden, can you wave at everybody? Good to see you.
But unfortunately, our governor vetoed the bill.
He did.
So once again, going back to what I do at North Carolina Faith and Freedom, it's just essential. You heard Jason talk about it. I don't want to reiterate it. Just this issue of life on that bill, we had a bipartisan support. We had Democrats that came in and voted boldly. We had Republicans voted because at the end of the day, every life is precious. Every one of them should be protected in the womb. And so this is not a political issue. This is just men and women from both political parties standing up for what's so important to advocate for life. But there's also another opportunity. We're at the pulpit in churches. There's another opportunity for Advocate for Life. And so, Julie, you work with churches some in your role at Human Coalition.
I do.
What are some ways in which pastors can do that from the pulpit?
Well, I think it's important to remember, whatever happens with Roe, whether it comes completely down, it's partially dismantled, kind of an incremental process. I'm not the attorney, Chelsea is. But no matter what happens, the law can change. But the circumstances under which women believe that they must have an abortion, those circumstances are not going to change. Chelsea, I've heard you say several times, what is it, about 1 million women a year? Almost 1 million women a year seek abortion. So those circumstances, like Rachel outlined earlier, that doesn't change. And so what will change is the law, in which Chelsea can talk about, in multiple states. Some states will automatically restrict abortion more. Some will try to increase the access to abortion. So now more than ever, the church must step up and be there for these women and change those circumstances that have brought her to that place. We cannot do this without the church. We just can't. And so Human Coalition has a network of churches that we work with to help us serve women. I know that pregnancy resource centers all over the state of North Carolina partner with churches, either financially, with volunteers, with assistance, with changing that culture inside and outside of the church. It's time for the church to lead in this effort, and should lead in this effort. And so, I know some of you probably go to churches that are really involved in this, and that might be how you found out about this event today, is word was spread within your church. Maybe you're in a church and you've never really heard your pastor talk about this or address the needs of women who are facing unexpected pregnancies. Well, now, and you may have thought in your mind, well, you know what, I really should talk to him about it. Now's the time to send the email, to set up the appointment with your pastor and talk to him about how your church and your pastor can address the needs of these women, to be a bold voice for life, for our little preborn babies and their moms, as we march forward into this post-Roe world.
So, Chelsea, let's get to the nuts and bolts here. Let's just get serious. You and your team radically changed the landscape in America from a pro-life legislative perspective. And even though it's been challenged in the Supreme Court, it's still the land of the law in Texas. So can you explain to us exactly what that law is?
Yes, I love to talk about it because it's really exciting stuff. First, I'll say that it was a collaborative effort. And so one of our top priorities is building strong alliances with people who are much smarter than me and our team. So we had the real concept that made the bill successful and different than every other heartbeat bill was created by an attorney named Jonathan Mitchell, who is the former Solicitor General of Texas. He's also the smartest person I know. And so when we delved into this, we reached out, and then from there, we brought our pro-life expertise, my constitutional law background, and he had already started it, and then we collaborated and supplemented that expertise in the bill. And then we became the advocacy group that brought the testimony, did the floor debate and prep. And so that's a little practically about what we did. What happened in the Texas Heartbeat Act, as you may know, 12 states passed Heartbeat Acts, and 12 states failed to see them enacted as a result of Roe versus Wade. Texas is the first bill to see a Heartbeat Act enacted, and that is because the Texas version of the bill says that the government is not allowed to enforce the bill. Not at all. Not a local DA, not the Attorney General, not the Medical Licensing Board. No state official is allowed to enforce the Heartbeat Act protections against an abortion provider. Because without government action, there's not a constitutional violation. Instead, the power of enforcement is given to the people, where some of us may constitutionally believe it belongs. Instead, it's private citizens, you, me, an unborn child who has aborted its grandmother, father maybe who didn't want the abortion, can privately sue the abortion provider for wrongful death. And we found that that is the biggest stick we could have against abortion providers, because on September 1, without a single lawsuit ever being filed against an abortion provider, every single abortion provider complied. And they have been complying since. Thank you. It's been really exciting. I get a little legal nerd about it, but the beauty of the bill is that abortion providers, we know, if they get sued, any doctor, they have to report it to their employers. They have to report it to their licensing boards and all of their future employers. It's a true black mark on their resume. And abortion providers can't be insured by insurance companies who don't want to insure them for unknown amounts of liability from now until kingdom come, which is when we would be suing them until they stop abortions. So it was a really effective mechanism to cause them to adhere to a law where your local DAs in your urban areas are never actually going to enforce your current abortion laws. Even if we win Roe, even if you outlaw abortion tomorrow, you know your Democrat DAs are not going to bring cases against abortion providers. So we considered all of that strategically with this mechanism. And how it worked is, I think you mentioned the Supreme Court case. Of course, the abortion providers freaked out, and they sued every state official they normally sue, and a few individuals. And the Supreme Court threw out all of the lawsuits against the state officials, except for the licensing board. That's now thrown out by the Texas Supreme Court, because they said, actually, there's no state official to sue, so you can't enjoin the bill. And all these individuals signed declarations saying they're not going to sue, so we can't enjoin them. There's no defendants. And so that is why the Heartbeat Act is enacted. And the result is an estimated 100 lives a day right now are being saved in Texas. And that's regardless of Roe, which is our goal. We have this sense of urgency here that we can't wait another 50 years until the Supreme Court gets it together and overrules Roe. We want to save lives today. And so do we wish it started at conception? Yes, I've got something up my sleeve. Have we seen trends form where women are leaving the state? Absolutely. They're illegally ordering abortion pills online from Europe without ever seeing a doctor in person, without a sonogram. She doesn't know how far along she is. Her prescriptions are filled in an Indian pharmacy and mailed to her door for an at-home abortion. It is dangerous for women, what is happening. And we've got bills for that too. So we're seeing these trends pop up. If you want to know what a post-Roe world will look like, I think Texas is an excellent model to start seeing those trends pop up.
So that's great. So technically, if she goes in to get an ultrasound at an OBGYN and there's a heartbeat, then that's that. Is that the way that the bill is?
That's correct. If the child has a heartbeat, it's protected from death by abortion. And, you know, I talked to Rachel Lane, who you heard from earlier, about what has women's response been in the wake of all of this. And at first, I think there was a lot of confusion. But in that time, women now know about the law. They understand the law. They've heard about it. And she said some of them are now resolved, really, to keep their pregnancies. Because we know 64% of women feel coerced into their abortions. They feel that their partner is pushing them, their parents are pushing them, sometimes their circumstances. And so sometimes there's this sigh of relief that she's too far along. Okay, what are my options? And we're there for that too.
Do you mind, Chelsea, could you talk a little bit about the Alternatives to Abortions program in Texas? Do you mind, Jim? I would just love for our folks here in North Carolina to know about that.
So the other side of this equation, besides directly saving lives, is serving their moms. And we love and care for their moms. You've heard time and time again our stories, and other pregnancy resource centers are here. Bobby, I think I saw you earlier, who have dedicated their lives to serving their moms. And so I don't think you can talk about a post-Roe world without talking about both. And the Texas Alternatives to Abortion program was a program created by our legislature that has $100 million in funds and resources for pregnant moms in need. And it's an incredible program that wants to reach her, serve her, see her get on her feet, and you have to have both. And thankfully, the state of North Carolina has taken great strides in that direction, because they know if they're going to get a government veto, at least they can start serving women in the budget. And it should be something everyone can get on board with, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, no matter what vote you have. We can all get behind support services to women, with the goal being their independence, with the goal being families that flourish and stability in the home. And so the other side of this is truly making sure that pregnancy resource centers and groups like ours are able to reach these women and rescue their children.
That's tremendous. And it's really all a model for North Carolina pregnancy centers. You know, if we enact a heartbeat, these moms are going to need services. And we certainly don't want them going to the Planned Parenthood now to get clinical services. And so it's a great opportunity for pregnancy centers, Human Coalition, to be able to be meeting and preparing to provide medical services to these women that are now stepping up and deciding to choose life. I know many centers across our state, pregnancy centers, are doing this. But it's really an opportunity in planning. If you serve on a board, if you're a volunteer at a pregnancy center, if you're a church that's supporting a pregnancy center, just because we're going to possibly be in a post-Roe world, it actually means that our pregnancy centers are going to need more support from us, because the needs and the women that are going to be coming to their doors may even be more increased because they now need those clinical services. Is that what you're seeing in Texas?
We are seeing that. We're also seeing it become steady, though. You know, I think the left was hoping that there was going to be like this crisis outcome, but the truth is what we're seeing is stability in Texas. Women are consistently seeking out services. Women are consistently seeking out help. And women are largely accepting of the law. They understand how this works. So if you're like me, you know women are strong, they are capable, they are intelligent, and they're adapting. And so many of them are taking more precautions against becoming pregnant in the first place, is what the studies are showing. And then again, women are going out of state, and they are ordering the pills online, and they're largely accepting of the law. I always say this isn't our mom's 1973. This is a world we live in that has anti-pregnancy discrimination laws on the books. 2,700 pregnancy resource centers across our country is an incredible infrastructure in place to meet the needs that are out there, and it's working. So I think we're really confident and hopeful in a post-Roe world for moms and their unborn children. And we know they go hand in hand. We know they belong together, and they're flourishing.
That's tremendous. So we've got about 10 minutes left. And so I know we talked and we might want to take some questions from the audience in regards to Heartbeat in Texas, but is there anything else that, because this is your last time on the platform. You've been so gracious to come up and visit us from Texas, and we know you're going to be back here again when we advance some type of a Heartbeat here in North Carolina. Is there anything else you want to share with the folks before we go to Q&A?
Yes, I think one of the bills I'm most proud of for Human Coalition is a bill called the Every Mother Matters Act. We coined the term EMMA for it. And this bill is based on a statistic that we've discovered from our work with women. When we ask every client who comes in the door, if your circumstances were different, would you prefer to parent? 75% of the time she says yes. And I think that's really powerful because we know the desire of these women's hearts is to parent, and they just need someone to tell them they can do this. They are capable. So we designed the Every Mother Matters Act around that kind of core fundamental principle we've learned about these women. And it essentially says before a woman obtains an abortion, she will call us or a group like ours and get an offer of assistance. What is it you need? Is it safe housing? Is it a job? Is it affordable childcare? And we'll walk with you as long as it takes, years even, if that's what you want. It's completely driven by her needs, and the resources that best fit her. And we think it would decrease abortion by 40%. Just by offering her that assistance, which is a powerful number. And so we have passed that bill in Arkansas. We got close in Texas, close in Alabama. I think in the next 2 years, you can see that as a rising trend post-Roe. And it's one that, of course, we hope you guys are all supportive of and would like to see in North Carolina. After, we get through the veto-proof situation, we'd love to see bills like that think holistically about serving women and their children passed.
That's tremendous. And that's a model that each of us can follow now. We don't need the government in order to help us pass legislation to be able to meet the needs of women in our communities. So go talk to your pregnancy center director. Go talk to the clinical staff at Human Coalition. Find out if there's women in our community and find out what they're doing and find out how your church, your family can support that center to start to meet their needs. You may be a small business owner and you may have a job opening. Have you ever thought to contact the pregnancy center to say, is there a mom that might need a job? So remember, politics is going to follow the culture. So here in North Carolina, let's allow politics to follow the culture that we create as believers in Christ to taking care of these moms. We don't need legislation in order to do this. I think we're probably going to have to ultimately have it. But until then, let's figure out a way to begin to start to meet those needs before the government comes in. create and find out exactly what these moms need in North Carolina, and then we can go to the influencers in our state and say, this is the model that's working in North Carolina. This is exactly what's happening, and hey, let's go ahead and advocate for it to be able to help more women in North Carolina. So let's take some questions. Does anybody have some questions? Yes.
Hi, ladies. I heard you address fathers in all of this, and I feel that because the men or the boys don't have any say in what's involved, that they probably pressure the moms more into getting an abortion because they feel they don't have any rights. So I think maybe that's something that we should cull, or we should, promote, that the fathers should be able to have some sort of say. I know there's probably nothing on the law books, but maybe just in promoting some sort of reaction from.
Absolutely. Well, Chelsea could talk to a legal standpoint, but I would say, that's excellent, because this is where the church can step in a very major way also, as far as speaking the truth about this issue, as far as making sure people understand that resources are provided, and raise godly Christian young men who are going to be equipped to follow God's design here. It's an opportunity to minister in a major way. And also, when we talk about what that family needs after they choose life, he needs support too. So thank you for bringing that up. I know that a number of pregnancy resource centers are doing mentoring for fathers. And isn't that something the church can be involved in too? That's okay. So y'all add that to your list of what you're going to talk to your pastor about, okay?
Do we have another question? Yeah, right ahead.
Speaking of that, do they actually have a list of things that a church can do that it's already kind of pre-planned? Like we could hand this list to the ladies group and say, this is what they need, or this is where somebody could get plugged in?
Right. I know we have a number of pregnancy resource center directors in here, Human Coalition. We have 7 of our own clinics and partner with clinics all over the nation. I think it's safe to say that if you reach out to your local pregnancy resource clinic and say, can I help? There's everything from providing baby showers. One thing that a lot of people are doing these days is Amazon gift list, that you can choose, mentoring programs, everyday assistance for moms, helping with childcare. Just reach out to your local pregnancy resource center, because like I said earlier, the pregnancy resource movement can't do this without you. And so shout out to our volunteer team over here, Mitzi and Michelle. Will you wave? So there are volunteer coordinators for this area here in Raleigh, and I think it would be a great time. I hope it's okay, Mitzi, I'm going to mention that we are having a special walk on October 8th, and so stay tuned for more information on that and some ways that people can help.
If you're a center director, raise your hand so people know that you're here as a center director and they can connect with you.
There we go, here. Yep.
Thank you all for what you're doing. Do we have time for 2 more questions? Okay.
This would be more for Chelsea, is it? Thank you, ladies, so much for what you do. Can you explain a little bit, if you can, about where government funding comes, where the funding comes from if any clinic needs funding or requests for funding? Does it come directly from the government? Where does that money pile come from? Second part is, do you feel that we have enough support in the General Assembly of North Carolina that's really fighting for that funding if they're able to? And I guess if you know where that funding is coming from, is it the same funding that Planned Parenthood can request as well?
Those are really great questions. So I'm going to try to hit each one. The first is the funding comes from your general state budget. And so it's something that they write in as a line item in the budget. You know, in Texas, it's an alternatives to abortion budgetary item specifically. In North Carolina, it's the same. It's exclusive in our state to non-abortion providers. You can't so much as refer to an abortion, assist a woman with getting an abortion. It completely excludes Planned Parenthood. In fact, in Texas, not even Medicaid can reimburse for abortion. So our state has really strong protections there. I'd have to look into North Carolina, but it is bifurcated in that way. And then the other thing I would add to that is the legislators were very supportive. You'll see a number of them here who you will hear from on the panel who can be more specific about what that looked like in North Carolina to pass the funding and what kind of battle that was. But they can all see the writing on the wall that women need help. And so we saw strong support for getting that out there. And then I don't quite remember your third question, but if you want to remind me. Okay, the answer for anything we advocate for is no. We're always going to exclude the abortion providers. They get $700 million between Medicaid kickbacks and the federal government every year. So everything we advocate for leaves them out of the equation. And many states have already said Planned Parenthood can't see a dime of our taxpayer money. But I do want to tell you guys that there is another side to this, and that is that Planned Parenthood has their own policy group, and they are pushing hard for more money to repeal the Hyde Amendment for the first time in decades, which means your taxpayer dollars at the federal level would go towards funding abortion. And so when you're thinking about your tickets and your vote, your ballots and your votes, it's really important to understand the left wants insurance-covered abortions, taxpayer-funded abortions, and limitless abortions. And so we're doing everything we can to stand in that gap, but that's where you guys come in as active members of our community and society for the children.
And Julie's going to have the legislators up here in just a second, and I'm sure that's a question that you can ask them in regards to access for Planned Parenthood. So we've got one more question. Okay, Jean?
Actually have two questions. I'm an executive director over 2 pregnancy centers, and one of the things that has truly been concerning me, among many, is this abortion pill and how people are able to so easily get it and circumvent the law. And I'm interested to see what the plan on, to address this is. The other thing, and this is similar topic, and maybe it's not exactly this, but it's also my understanding that Planned Parenthood is now starting to generate a lot of money from transgender medications. And I'm interested to see if there's going to be any kind of connection between these two things as far as pushing forward with laws and trying to move forward with Planned Parenthood is just evil. How are we going to stop it?
You said it. So for your first question, yes, the abortion pill, I think 50% of all abortions now are the pill. And it's a huge problem. We've seen them retreat from physical facilities and doing consultations on apps, and all of this can be done online. I think I mentioned earlier, women aren't even getting sonograms. They'll call our clinics. I heard Rachel say yesterday and say, I have 4 pills from this international pharmacy. Which ones do I take and when? That's dangerous for women, and there's a dark truth there that I'm glad you brought to the surface. So we have a plan, and the plan is it's a really difficult area of the law to regulate international pharmacies and international doctors and blind websites that we don't know who's behind it. And so our answer to that is it's very difficult for the state, the federal government won't do it, to regulate those areas because of something called the Commerce Clause. But the civil enforcement mechanism is not state enforcement. And so we, from a civil liability standpoint, are planning a bill right now. I mean, we're among friends, so I can say this. Dean, don't give me eyes over this, but to hold every single person responsible in that funnel, from the website content creators to the international physicians to the pharmacies to your postal service if they mail it. We're going to consider it an illicit substance is the goal. You can't mail cocaine. Why can you mail harmful substances that kill humans? And really heavily regulate that. But for us, we're thinking constitutionally it needs to be done through a civil cause of action for wrongful death. So that's one of the solutions we've come up with for that. It's really difficult. There are some others out there, but that's where we're at this phase, and it's a little preliminary, so don't go, put me on Facebook with that. But, we're working through those challenges with as many allies who will join us as possible. I think Planned Parenthood is pivoting. They know they're losing tons of money. They're, for as much talk as they give about how much this hurts impoverished women, they're upping their prices on abortion. And so I think that they view that as their next money funnel. But I don't have a lot of answers about how that specifically relates to abortion.